I'll admit, having a 5.1.2 setup has been pretty cool the last few months. But I know that having 4 height channels is an option. I mean, come on. Is it really that much better?
Well, let me try and answer that for you now. Hello and welcome, my friends. My name is Elon Osborne and I like to talk about movies, audio, and music. And today I want to go over my findings when I tested out 2 height channels versus 4 height channels. During these tests, I reduced my setup to be 5.2.2 and 5.2.4. But before I move on, you may have seen this video where I went over which placement is best when you only have 2 height channels. And the result of those tests proved that placing them to the sides of the listening position or straight above seemed to have the most immersive effect. It really plays with your brain's binaural ability to perceive sound coming from above.
Side note.
In these tests, I'm using the Iota AVX17 preamp, and when you're assigning the speaker configuration to 5.2.2, it automatically assigns the middle speakers as your height channels. Even when you're connecting the cables in the back, if it's only 2 height channels, you have to connect them to the top middle inputs, or else you won't get any sound coming out. But when you assign 4 height channels, you connect your cables to the top front and top rear inputs, not the top middle anymore. So right there, it goes to show that Iota already knew that the best placement for only 2 height channels would be the middle, either up and to the sides or straight up above your listening position. Just something I found interesting. But because of that interesting tidbit, that meant it was easy to switch between 2 and 4 height channels since they were all connected and ready to go. 2 height channels, boom, to the sides. 4 height channels, boom, front and back. So that was very convenient in this comparison since I didn't have to disconnect and reconnect cables every time I wanted to switch between 2 and 4 height channels.
How do they sound?
One scene that I frequently use as a good baseline for Atmos effects isn't even mastered in Atmos. It's mastered in DTS, which happens to be the scene in Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets when Gilderoy Lockhart introduces the class to Cornish pixies. When the pixies escape the cage and start flying all over, it's an incredibly immersive scene with the little pixies' voices traveling all around you and above, the whooshing sounds of them flying by, and when Hermione performs her Immobilis charm, stopping the pixies from moving around, there's this twinkling and high frequency ringing sound that fills the room and slowly fades away. It's really cool. Another test was the intro to Mad Max Fury Road, since there are a lot of Atmos height effects happening, especially when the voices in Max's head start talking. But with both Harry Potter and Mad Max, even the music plays a big role in what's heard in the height channels. Now, in testing just 2 height channels, yes, there was a good sense of scale and height involved. The pixies were swooshing around, laughing and causing mayhem. Max's internal voices were above me, and my brain was noticing the overall scale of sound. But when I switched it to 4 height channels, which are mounted on the front and back walls, there was still a sense of scale and height involved, but there was one thing that stood out: movement. When Hermione yells out Immobilis, the ringing sound now traveled from front to about the middle of the room. The echoing voices in Max's head weren't just above me, but traveled to various parts of the ceiling. Oh, okay. You see, when you have 4 height channels, you've essentially created a 3D cube. You have your ear level or bed layer speakers, and you have 2 speakers in front of your listening position and behind your listening position. And since both Atmos and DTS are object-based codecs, engineers in Hollywood can then place those objects within that 3D cube however they want. If you only have 2 height channels, you might get some movement up and down, maybe to the sides, but no forward and backward movement. Granted, not all Atmos mixes are the same. There are static and dynamic mixes. Static meaning that sound is coming out of the speakers but not actively moving around. But there are mixes where objects are moving around from one speaker to another, following the action on screen. That's called dynamic. And it depends on the director's vision, but also how high the audio budget is on any given film. So the more money thrown at the sound department, the more likely you'll see a dynamic mix where a lot of objects have been panned around the soundstage. It's just another layer that takes time and money. Simple as that. The other factor to think about is that not everything will be mixed properly with only 2 height channels. Most audio post-production facilities in Hollywood are mixing on a stage that has a 7.1.4 configuration. So if it's been mixed with 4 height channels in mind, but you only have 2 in your system, there might be an effect that's supposed to travel from front to back in your height channels, but at one point will suddenly dip down to your rear surrounds on your ear level. TechnoDad went over this in a video not too long ago that you should also check out. So I would say that having 4 height channels is going to be a truer version of Atmos, since that's how it was mixed. But lastly, I totally understand that having 4 height channels doesn't mean you can just throw another pair of speakers on your ceiling and call it a day. It means you also need to invest in a 9-channel receiver at minimum, which is a huge jump in price from a 7-channel receiver. So I know having 2 height channels is the best way to be introduced to Dolby Atmos or DTS:X, but with the holidays coming up and things going on sale, maybe this is the year to finally get that true 5.1.4 system up and running? Is it worth it compared to having a 5.1.2 system? I think so. I know not all movies will have a dynamic mix that takes advantage of sounds moving around within that 3D cube, but when you come across a movie that does, man, it's really cool when your brain can sense that movement around and above you. Spine tingling.
Dolby Atmos achievement unlocked!
Thank you for joining me on this quick comparison of height channel setups. I know I had fun really trying to get a sense of what the differences were. I knew I was going to like 4 height channels better, but I really wanted to get down to the nitty-gritty and find out why. So I hope I explained it well. Now it's your turn, folks. What configuration are you rocking right now? Are you hoping to upgrade to 4 height channels this holiday shopping season? Or are you content with 2 height channels and don't feel the need to invest in a 9-channel receiver? To each their own. Let's start a conversation, people. As always, please be kind to each other out there. Don't just watch TV and movies, experience them. And of course, always be listening.